Hi everyone and welcome to this video. This video is going to be about the basics of solar. So as a lot of you know, I've got my own off-grid solar power system, but it's not basic anymore. I've done things to it, it's evolved and evolved and evolved, and I've got automation systems in it and contactors, relays, all this sort of stuff. But for those who want to make a basic system in order to probably do something basic or just to understand it, my current solar panel or solar power system is not ideal for that. So I'm going to show you on here how to make a very simple one to get started. Right, so like I said, I'm going to try and keep this very simple, and yeah, let's start. So what are you going to need to start with? Simply, of course. So of course you're going to need your panels. I'm going to go into these in more depth in a minute, but you'll need your panels. You need a charge controller, so charge controller. You're going to need batteries, and you will need an inverter. Inverter. They are the four major components of any off-grid solar power system. So now I'll go into a bit more depth and explain, some of the details of these, why you need them, what they do, anything to look out for, etc. Right, so the main component of the whole thing is of course panels, and panels come in some different shapes and sizes, but the most popular one, at least in the UK, is the standard, which is just like a frame. It looks kind of like that, and inside it's sort of segregated into what look like little rectangles. So with these panels you have two terminals. You have the plus terminal and you have the minus terminal. Very straightforward. And these panels, they usually come in different, a voltage of a subset of different voltages. So you could get 12 volt, you could get 24 volt, and you could get 36 volt. They are the usual ones, and they also have an amperage, which is their maximum output, if you like, and usually that's somewhere between, 5 to 10 amps, something like that. So with these panels, you can add them together in different ways. I mean, if I have two of these, I could join the pluses together, I could join the minuses together, and then I could expect that I could receive up to double the amount of amperage. So if this was let's say if this is a 10 amp rated panel, and let's say it's 24 volts, then if I was to parallel two together, join the two pluses and join the two negatives, I could expect that I'd be able to receive up to 20 amps. Whereas if I was to wire them up in series, which is plus to negative, I could expect that I'd get an amperage of still 10 amps, but I'd be able to get 48 volts maximum. And that's kind of the way this thing works. You can wire them in series parallel, you can wire them in different ways. And anyway, the way these things work is that they work off sunlight, of course, and basically the more light that falls upon these panels, the more power is generated. The next thing we'll look at is charge controllers, and my charge controller looks something like this. It's like a metal case thing, and it has fins on it so that it can keep cool, and it has various different points here where you can connect wires and whatever, and sometimes they have remotes as well where you can do various things. So the idea of the charge controller is that, it's pretty common sense. It controls the amount of charge. Alright, but for people who are new to solar, this is where people start to misunderstand. With solar, you don't actually get the power directly from the panels and use it. What you do is you charge batteries. So now, if I go back to the panel section here, so we'll get an amount of amperage and a voltage, and that is basically the source of our power. So we get an amount of voltage, we get an amount of amperage, therefore an amount of wattage. But then how do we use it? So what happens is that it goes to the charge controller, and the charge controller charges the batteries at an efficient rate, or an efficient way, the most efficient way for the amount of voltage and current that it's got. So, I mean, if we have 12 volt batteries, then the charge controller will get the amount of power from solar, and it will probably step it down. So if we've got 48 volts coming in or something, it will step it down to 12 volts, and it will attempt to charge all of the 12 volt batteries the best way it can, the most efficient way it can. So basically we've got batteries, or let's just say one battery, and we've got the plus and the minus. The minus will go to one and the plus will go to the other, and the panels will be connected to an input. So let's say the panels go over here, so we've got a plus and a minus to the panels. So the power comes in, the charge controller basically steps it down usually, and charges the batteries, and that's all it does. And the reason you need this is because if you were attempting to pump, I don't know, 20 amps at 48 volts into a 12 volt battery, you'd destroy it. It would start bubbling, it would go crazy, it would heat up, and it would probably eventually explode. So yeah, you need the charge controller to charge the batteries properly. And yeah, that's the idea of a charge controller. Now these things come in two different types. There's MPPT, so MPPT, and there's PWM. And without going into too much depth, MPPT means maximum power point tracking, and PWM means pulse width modulation. And yeah, I don't want to go into too much depth, but essentially, if your budget allows, this one is better. PWM is cheaper but not as efficient. So yeah, I've got a preference for MPPT. Now, what's next? Right, next I'll look at batteries. So you get two different main types, and one of them seems to be popping up more and more and more, so maybe this is the way to go, and that is lithium ion. Now, I don't personally use these in my solar system, but I do have a lot of 18650 cells, and they look quite promising actually. It looks like they will work very well, but I don't. The most common one is lead acid. So lead acid batteries, and these are very, very common worldwide, and the chances are that if you've got a petrol car, your car has a lead acid battery inside it. So with lead acid batteries, well in fact any batteries, there are certain considerations, and just to name a few different considerations of these batteries, there's a voltage, a capacity, there's of course a price, you need to consider care, you need to consider the setup, and with lead acid batteries you also need to consider the plates, and I'll explain more about that in a second. Right, so concerning voltage, with your batteries you usually get a 12 volt battery. So if it's if it's lead acid, you'll get a 12 volt battery, just like that, just like a cube shape with posts on the top here, and that's usually 12 volts, and you'll have a positive terminal and a negative terminal. Straightforward. With capacity, with a car battery you get various different capacities, but usually they're about 45 amp hour, which means that it can power 45 amps for 1 hour, or it can power 1 amp for 45 hours, theoretically. So of course that's just the capacity, that's how much power it can basically store. And then down here, the price. Price is a big deal, and the reason why price is a big deal is because you can actually get different types of lead acid battery. So you could get, there's actually another type of battery you get which looks more like this. It looks kind of like that, and these are 2 volt 2-volt batteries, and they have a different capacity. But these ones are generally very, very expensive. So, you know, it matters. There's also another type you can get, which are called deep cycle, which are like these, but they're called deep cycle batteries. And the reason they're called deep cycle, well, in fact, I'll go to that in a minute because it's to do with the plates. So, price matters, and you know, if you're a new person to solar and you just want to give it a go, there really is no point in going for these 2-volt batteries. Keep it simple and go for the 12-volt batteries. The reason being is that the car batteries, you know, are very readily accessible and they're a lot cheaper than these, and they'll do you for solar. Some people will say, oh, you know, you can't use those, they won't last very long. Now, care. Just going back over to these batteries again. Now, in the previous piece of paper, I shown you the charge controller, and the whole idea of the charge controller was to charge the batteries properly. And that's really important. You have to charge them properly, because if we were to get 36 volts and just pump it straight into this battery, it would start bubbling, it would get very hot, and it would probably explode or it would boil off or something like that. So if you don't care for your battery, you know, you'll destroy it. They need caring for properly. Now, as well as the usual care, which is, you know, being careful to not undercharge and not overcharge and all this, that and the other, with these ones you can also top the water up as well, and if there's not enough water, the batteries won't work fully or properly. Anyway, so yeah, about care. Now, there's a major issue here as well that I need to go over. If you continually discharge these and leave them discharged for long amounts of time, the life of the battery will be, you know, lowered significantly. So when you look after these batteries, it's important that you don't keep them discharged. As soon as you use them, charge them back up as soon as possible. So this is why really solar, it's probably not advised that you use solar power at night time, because you've got to remember that if you use these at night time and you start discharging the batteries, there's no sun to charge them back up. So you know, what you do with that info is up to you. It may work if you only use light discharges, like maybe some lights or something like that. But yeah, these things need caring for, and there you go. Now, setup, and in fact, no, I'll go to plates first before setup. So plates. Now, inside this 12-volt battery, you have a lot of plates, and for solar, people recommend deep cycle batteries. And deep cycle, basically, inside this thing, you have 6 thick plates, well, thick-ish plates. And in a car battery, they might be like that, you know, 4, 5, 6. You might have thick, you know, thick-ish plates like that. And now, in a deep cycle battery, the plates will be more like that, much thicker. And what it means is basically that the thick plates are more suited to being discharged for long periods of time and to lower voltages, and then they are more used to being charged up slowly, and that's kind of the idea. And basically, just to get to the point, deep cycle ones apparently last longer. Now, I don't know this for certain because I don't use them, and I never have. I just use car batteries. I've got 12 of them and they work perfectly for me in my 24-volt system. But anyway, apparently deep cycle are the way to go, but they incur a bigger cost.